Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy anniversary day for me moving into this place. It was 3 years ago today that Kathy and I moved here. And let me see, what was it? 5 months later I died. Well, yeah, 5 months later. Anyway, it was a good year. All things considered, it was a really good year. So this is a quick discussion on the Woonomics, the economics of Woo, because we're entering into a period of time starting on the 24th of February that this is going to dominate us for maybe many years. I don't know. In the original data sets, the long-range data, which had so all of my data sets, the way I did the timing was, boy, this is just so complicated. Timing was a function of the emotive value summations on particular words. So some words have an immediacy impact and then they wash away from you. Other words have sort of a softer impact, but they hang on and push you for a long time. The difference would be like the connotations of she jacked my ride versus my ex-wife was awarded my vehicle in the divorce. They have different emotive weights that carry forward into time further the way they're expressed. So in one sense, she jacked my ride is sort of an immediacy kind of a thing, right? You don't know what the outcome is and so on. But if you say that your ex-wife was awarded your car in the divorce, well, then that's telling whoever you're talking to that you have long-term problems as a result of this, usually, right? I mean, if you're somebody with a car collection, it's, less of an issue, that kind of thing. But in the aggregate, you could rely on the timing clues. And long-term data I calculated it all out over this band of words and phrases. The long-term data sets had a range of about 19 months. So we would get something and then it would be 19 months later. So almost 2 years later before it shows up. So like the 2016 reports, 2017 reports were off. It was actually beyond the 19 months for the long-range data. The aspect of all of the timing, so immediacy data was 3 days out to 3 weeks, but the range, the absolute range could have been another 3 weeks because there's an error range in each of the types of data. The immediacy data would have an error range equal to its entire range. The short-term data sets, which was from 3 weeks out to approximately the 4th month out, could have another 3 months on top of that. So they could be 6 months in total range. So there was this error factor because I was just applying my understanding of the words and the emotional impact of them that I could suss out through the computer. And that application did not necessarily reflect what the mass of people felt for those words. In other words, another way of saying that is that I personally, in a value I might have put down for a word, may have assigned that word too high of a value or too low of a value relative to its timing, relative to everybody else on the planet, just because I had some emotional attachment to that word that others don't, or did not that others do. Complicated, really complicated. Or rather complex, just lots of parts, but simple in its concepts. Anyway, so long-term data could go out essentially 4 years almost, right? So we're looking at approximately 38 to 39 months in the long-term data. So thus we get ourselves a situation where 2016 data is appearing now. There were other issues relative to censorship and that sort of thing. But so we're now in the situation described in the reports of the past here. It's unfolding for us, and we're going to get into a bifurcation of, so everything is splitting, you notice, right? We have strange energies from space, we have the rise of intractable political ideology versus everybody else. and everything keeps seeming to split. We keep seeming to be in a divisive time. I can put these down to the strange energies from space. But returning to this concept, we're in a divisive time relative to currency, to money, to economics, to financial things. That divisive time has us divided in a couple of ways, okay? And so the divisions would be, could be described, as I'm describing them, as Woonomics, all right? Woo is energy. Woo is the concept, so Woo is the concept of the perception of energy. Not merely the energy itself, but the perception of energy. So Woo, being the perception of energy, is all about perceiving those things that are basically not as visible or not in your face as is the mainstream paradigm. So we can say that the mainstream paradigm would be the dollar reserve economic world, okay? And that the Woo approach would be gold, silver, and cryptos. But in this sense, there's always been a counter proposition to anything that the mainstream wants to put out. So we find, for instance, that as the populace of the what we call the United States, that is to say, continental North America, the Aboriginal populace had wampum, which was these little shells that are harvested up off of these little razor clam shells of a very specific species that's limited scarcity, limited abundance, and is harvested up here off the coast of Vancouver Island at some difficulty usually. And they're tasty. The razor clams are tasty little guys, but the shells were wampum. That was the money. That was the medium of exchange for up to maybe 60 million humans here in North America. And along come the Spanish in Hispaniola and Cuba, and because of the cross connections between Cuba and Florida, the diseases that the Spanish brought with them spread throughout and killed millions of people very rapidly throughout the continental North America. So it was the Spanish Empire that killed almost all of or killed tens of millions of people in South America and North America. In South America, in one region of the Amazon, a particular Spanish expedition down hunting for silver and gold, going after the Incas, is estimated to have killed 24 million people and wiped out an entire civilization as a result of a single point of contact. And they just basically brushed by an Amazonian point of contact for this huge Amazonian delta population, which then died off over the course of the next 100 years. And the whole civilization collapsed to the point that the people that were left there are the remnant tribes that we now see inhabiting pockets of Amazonia. And it was a thriving population of over 20 million people. And they were killed off mostly by smallpox. That was the scourge of the Americas. Anyway, though, so the point being, it's the Spanish Empire, guys. It's not, I mean, we didn't come on over here and slaughter 60 million people. There's a lot of things, and this is the thing about that the left does not understand about patriots and constitutionals, as an aside, part of the division stuff, right? Because those energies are fracturing us around this ideology that's all political, et cetera. What they do not grasp is that I'm very proud of being what we call an American. I'm proud of being a constitutional. I'm proud of living in the United States. And yeah, I know we've done some really shitty things collectively. And collectively, we're still doing shitty things. And we might yet do shittier things under the auspices of Beijing Biden and the CCP. However, that does not negate the honor and the value of who we are doing the good things we're doing and attempting to put down the shitty things, right? We own it. We know there's shitty things going on. We don't want those shitty things to go on. It's an incredibly difficult system to reform. It's an incredible difficult system to upend unless you're at the top doing these cultural revolutions, following the Mao playbook, the way the Democratic National Fascist Committee is doing, okay? So the left does not understand that this gives me a particular point of resolve, because I'm like all the other constitutionals. I'm no better, no worse, in the sense that I just want to maintain the value that the constitutional republic offers to the future of everyone. And I want fairness. And fairness is justice, because justice is balance, right? No advantage either side. No featherweight altering any of it. It's equal. And so the potential for equal outcome. Now, what I do with those opportunities may produce unequal outcome, but that's the way of universe. That's the understanding of how universe works. Universe is a meritocracy. We see this all around us. Evolution proves this. To deny this is to deny science and evolution, and I don't do stupid very well. So I don't deny science and I don't deny evolution and the impact on all of us. Unlike many people in the left who are trying to legislate or make universe conform to their wishes. And they're up here actually in the mainstream paradigm, okay? Because the left is the party of the dollar. They're the party of Wall Street. They're the party that has forced politics into everything, and they're now polluting the last of the dollar with the political chaos that has been engendered by the ideology and pumped up by these strange energies from space. All of which returns us to this next month, starting on the 24th of February, running through to the 25th, but that's as far as my immediacy data goes. But the long-term data, as I was saying earlier, goes out 19 months from that. If we made the assumption that particular temporal markers started the initiation of a particular process, then what's happening over this next month will conceivably go on for maybe 3 or 4 years. And what's happening this next month comes down to Woonomics. All right, and so I work woo. I've lived a life of woo. Woo is energy. Woo is the ability to perceive energies that are not necessarily visible to others. And this actually provides you in a meritocracy that is the materium, that is this universe, with an advantage if you apply correct thinking to those energies, right? And so here is a book that at its time was the pinnacle of thinking, a pinnacle of 1,400 years of thinking about the ether. Now the ether is down here in woo, all right? It's denigrated, it's shoved out. Yeah, it's a bunch of woo-woo crap, get out of here, the academics say. Ether, ha 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 ha. Well, fact of the matter is, I find a good book on the ether, and I plow through it. You only have to read half of it because half of it's in Latin and it's just a translation, so it's not really all that big. But so far I've obtained 3 patents as a result of this, and I've got 9 others I'm developing, and I'm not alone. Other people are getting patents out of this woo-woo, out of this ether description, and so we're doing Woonomics. All right, our economic base is within the woo. My patents will become valuable to industry because they're really smart things. So for instance, I know how to make, and one of my patents goes to the idea of taking a goo, so you could take this stuff up into space, find, probably as a powder, find random bits of water floating around, micro comets of water, collect a bunch of them, mix it in with that water, make this paste, stretch it out into space, and it would become, because of the nature of my patent within the magnetics involved, it's going to become super rigid, much more rigid than anything here on Earth. So it'd be many times stronger than steel, many times stronger than titanium, and it would have a very interesting characteristic that it could be holed. It could be filled full of little micrometeorite holes and will stand up structurally far longer than the same amount of steel or titanium hauled up there. And you could haul this stuff up as a powder and expand it in an aerogel kind of a fashion. So it's sort of like turning aerogel into super rigid steel. Or titanium, even more rigid than steel and titanium because it's dynamic. It's an energetic level of rigidity that's applied to it via the magnetism use that I put into that patent because I was reading this book. So anyway, so getting back to Woonomics. All right, so we're going to go to this period. We're going to have a blip of emotional tension that's going to extend at least a month, all right? So my data, my immediacy data only goes out to March 25th. But I think I think this is just the beginning of that long range data that was written about in 2016. And so I think it actually extends much beyond that. And this is February 24th. Now, I've been told that February 24th is a big deal on options, expirations, and all of that kind of stuff. I've also been told that March is a delivery month. And that means that somebody has to pony up some actual physical precious metal sometime in March for somebody else in one of these weird-ass regulated exchanges, which I don't want to waste my brain power thinking about any of the details because they're artificial. That's why I don't play video games, right? I can't play against software when I wrote this stuff. I love competition. That's why I love to, sports, archery, sailing, all of this kind of stuff, because there's that random element, that meritocracy element of universe participating. Even in the best of the video games, the limitations are already structured into the software by the very nature of the software. And I've written so much of that stuff, I can jump ahead and see how it's going to have to work out based on what I know about how they're going to be structuring the algorithms involved. So I find it's boring, really. Anyway, so getting back to Woonomics. So we're going to enter in here a period that this is the bifurcation, okay? So this is the bifurcation that's occurring now as a result of these strange energies from space, all right? And so we're going to see more and more people start making more and more woo decisions. Woo decisions are energetically anything that is not mainstream paradigm. So cryptos are not mainstream paradigm, although they're becoming more and more. What's actually happening is that the people, the population that is swallowed into the mainstream paradigm by the media is starting to break free, and they're filtering down here, right? So let's give them, this is Valentine's Day, so we'll make it pink and hope it shows up. But these guys are coming down here in their little parachutes. Okay, so all these people are floating down into woo-woo world from the mainstream paradigm. They're abandoning the mainstream paradigm. They're finding it no longer works for them. They don't know what the hell's going on. It's all bizarre as hell out there. And everywhere they look, even their politics aren't making sense to them. And their money system is breaking down because we're also now in the Kondratiev winter for the dollar, which is the death of the dollar. That Kondratiev was this economist that talked to Stalin, C-O-N. So obviously Russian. And we're in the Kondratiev winter, which leads to a crack-up boom in which the central banks will print money, all kinds of currencies. They'll just print vast quantities of the stuff in order to buy into the emerging alternate paradigm. That's how paradigms shift. So you see this every time an empire dies, people drift away from the empire. That's actually what happens, is the drifting process. The Huns attack, Hadrian's Wall is cracked, the tribes from Gaul come on in and start looting the outer villages and stuff. Some farmers in the middle of the Roman Empire say, this ain't going to end well. I got that little place up in the mountains of Switzerland. let's all of us guys head on up there. Or there's, pandemic promoted fake diseasey, and people start drifting out of the cities. Okay, so it's the exact same thing as the breakup of the Roman Empire, the final destruction of the Byzantine Empire, and what Kondratiev forecast with his economics would happen to the state. Okay, not capitalism, but the state. That's why he went to the Gulag, by the way. Stalin commissioned this high-end economist to tell Stalin, when will capitalism die? So Kondratiev goes off, he thinks about it, he writes a bunch, he comes back, and he's going to tell Stalin, capitalism will die exactly on this point. Only problem is, communism is going to die about 100 years earlier. So anyway, he goes to the Gulag because Stalin didn't want to hear that. But the description of his death of capitalism is quite accurate. And so it's interesting for us to note that we're in this final crack-up boom, and that always during that period of time, the banksters, the money lenders, the people that control the money supply and the counting of it, etc., are going to be trying to get their own wealth out of it into the emerging alternate system, right? Whether that emerging alternate system is moving from the Byzantine Empire to the Ottoman Empire, learning Turkish, learning to do business, converting to Islam, whatever, right? All of these people do this. That's how the big money moves. And at this point, that's what the big money is doing. Only they don't have to learn Islam, they got to learn cryptos. So here we are coming into the new emerging paradigm, which is Woo. Now, I say this because we've run to the limit of what the quantum mechanics and general relativity / special relativity paradigm can supply. There have only been two views of the materium, this place where we live, at a physics level that have ever been proffered that are serious. One is the ether model, which existed and was thought about for over 1,400 years in the Byzantine Empire and an additional 600 years prior to that, and was the founding of our civilization because Nikola Tesla owned a copy of this book, and it was his favorite book, and it was the only book he was ever photographed with. And every photograph in which he was near a book, that was the book. Any photograph in which he was holding a book, that was the book. Saying something there, right? And so Nikola Tesla invents all of our electronics and everything here that we've got today in their nascent form because of his understanding of ether. He gets shit from Einstein and all these other people. They develop quantum mechanics and special relativity and general relativity, and all they can do thereafter is incrementally little improvements in what we've got. No fundamental breakthroughs. It just died up. With Tesla's death, fundamental breakthroughs died. Anyway, so until 1947, which curiously there was those rumored spacecraft that crashed, etc. Anyway, so the ether is one of the two paradigms. We're talking about bifurcation. The ether is down here because it's rejected by mainstream academia. Mainstream academia is in a system that is dying because it's now dollar-based and we're abandoning the dollar. People are abandoning the dollar in their parachutes every single day. People will do so today. They'll start making plans to get out of the existing system, to abandon the empire and go to somewhere, right? When the empires die, you have to choose. Where are you going to go? You could go to the Chinese Empire. Usually it's a clash between two empires that causes these kind of things. One empire is old and waning, another is rising up. Just as the Byzantine Empire was at its peak, you had the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and it was fierce at that stage, and it took over the complacency and apathy and tolerance of the Byzantine Empire. And so we had the fierce martial attitudes that overtook the laissez-faire attitudes and wiped out the Byzantine Empire. Now, at that point, there were a number of alternatives to the Ottoman Empire, and a lot of people chose those. And what we're going to probably re-engineer here in the United States, in North America, is a constitutional system that will be non-empiric and not, so the old American Empire will die. It's going to go away. We're not going to be policing South America. We're not going to be policing anybody. It's not our business to tell other people how to live, yada, 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 right? But we do have to have our own concepts of who we are and where we want to go in order that we may coalesce into something that is worth being involved in. Otherwise, we'll have people doing the little parachute activity and physically getting out of North America if it gets that bad. And we've already seen the shuffling within North America as the rot of the urban areas propels people out into the rural areas, and this huge change paradigm that occurs there. So these massive changes as we've gotten into the first active year of the age of Aquarius. Year zero was where we were actually in the last year of transition, and on December 27th, I believe it was, we had the grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, and all of the planets now are in Aquarius. They go back and forth and that kind of stuff, but nonetheless, we're all on the same half of the solar system, and we're all moving in. All of the planets are now in the first of the great years of Aquarius. These years number 2,160, and we're in year woo of that, which is to say the first year. Okay, and so our woo year, all of the woo is going to come on out. This collision is already starting. We're seeing all of the emotions, all of the stuff pouring on out, all the weird histrionics. Nothing makes sense. We're seeing the hollow Biden pretendency. And these things are merging into our current situation as emotive filler and emotive drivers. Okay, so you can see all kinds of people that are emotionally driven to do things. A lot of these people will not really understand why they're doing them or really even catch on to the particular emotions that are doing the driving, but nonetheless, they will make the activities. Our next set of these activities begins on February 24th. I think it's related to economics. I think it's related to economics because of a number of temporal markers that are coming on out now relative to silver. Silver being a very key economic driver. And if you're new to the woo, you need to go and look at videos that are done by David Morgan. Bix Weir, and others that they will reference. Okay, there's many people in the silver world to listen to, but these two will give you an overview. David is the grand master here, right? He'll tell you why things are occurring. All right, and Bix is all whipped up and he's going to tell you who's doing it. So you need to listen to both of them as we go forward, because we're now into this point of time where a number of silver markers are showing up. These silver markers were in the reports going back as far as 2015, I believe, maybe even 2014 at the very end. But they're showing up now. We're seeing all of these building little temporal markers. The temporal mark, okay, so my system worked on data sets composed of many words. Sometimes a data set would have 35,000 words in it. And so you got all these words in there, all these descriptors, these nouns, these adverbs, adjectives, etc., phrases, and so on, okay? So clusters of these words would group around a central word, seeming to magnify it. That would be a temporal marker. In other words, if this set of words appeared, or when this set of words appeared, manifested in reality, showed up in the mainstream press and so on, and people were discussing those words all clustered all together, then that marked the time that this larger set would be manifesting, and I would see lots of these other manifesting words, lots of the other words manifesting in a spread of time relative to the type of language. Anyway, so we've now had a number of the smaller temporal markers for silver appearing out in this area right here, which is to say these last 2 days or so. Okay, so Valentine's Day, basically. And so I'm presuming that this temporal marker filling in, we'll get to the point where on the 24th, we do see this rapid rise. I won't say sudden, but I will say rapid rise in emotional tension, and I believe it'll be around our economic system at the bank level. It may, though, be first at the bullion bank level. We may see a crisis around the 24th that erupts relative to these option expiration days or whatever the hell it is, or delivery days or whatever. The details of that escape me, and that's fine. But it'll hit us on the 24th. It'll continue on through March 25th. During this period of time, the emotional tension goes up like this. It doesn't even come down that far. Goes up like that in the charts. And then on March 4th through the 7th, we have another blip that sort of raises it up like that a bit. That's the 4th through the 7th of March. Anyway, so this is our graph of our emotional tensions going forward. Now, all right, so Woonomics has two different aspects to it, okay? You can use woo-woo to do economic stuff or fiscal stuff. So that would be like people that might be psychic using their psychic intuition to choose to make investments in particular cryptos or stocks or whatever, right? So that's using woo abilities, the ability to see the energies that others do not perceive, and use that to inform your decisions here in the materium in basically non-woo subjects. Now there's another kind of woonomics here, and that is where you reverse that, okay, where you have woo that affects the materium, and you do things to make it into an economic avenue for you, right? So that would be like my woo on the magnet stuff here that I got from Boscovich. Well, that's lost. It's stuck down there. And so I get a patent on it. So I'm taking woo stuff, I'm taking an actual literal description of the ether down to a minutia that you cannot grasp until you read this, triggers an idea. I turn the idea into a bunch of patents. And so those patents then have value. I've added value to universe by showing new ways to use magnetism and new ways to do things to magnetism with itself in its own little paradigm. And so values added to universe. Materium here is a situation where if you add value to it, it reflects back to you. So I will undoubtedly get some kind of financial reflection back at the point that those patents get picked up and people want to use them. And so that's using the woo to create an economic value. That's what I'm talking about down here, okay? These people up here use woo to try and do things to the dollar. So they're doing little woo. And they're trying to use woo as a tool to manipulate their paradigm and make it a better paradigm. And they even acknowledge that they use woo. This is all that spirit cooking shit, right? They just don't do it very well. They're just not very good at any of this because they lack the brain power to really grasp what they're dealing with, and they don't understand truly the nature of the materium, energy, the ether, the field, any of this. They just don't grasp it. And so they try and do this, you know, spirit cooking sort of stuff to try and drive a particular stock up or down or any of this kind of stuff. And it's just like, you know, that's like sandlot baseball, you know. It's a very, very, very brief understanding. You should grow out of it really quick. You should never, ever make that shit your life. But they do. Okay, so now the big woo is where you take these woo concepts like Tesla did, and Tesla took the drag that Steinmetz wrote about and described in his diagram, the drag of magnetism through copper, and had the idea of a rotating copper in a magnetic field, and all of our electronics were born, all right? So it's that easy to alter all of the materium. It's an idea, it's a thought. You know, you don't have to hit it with a hammer, you have to think. So teach yourself to think, and the whole materium is open to you. just like with Tesla. So anyway, so here we start getting into serious parachute time in February. It is my thinking, my conclusion, based on those old reports, the old data sets, some of which I still have. They're voluminous, terrible to try and save. But it's my thinking that we're going to see vast quantities of parachuting people, okay, dropping out of the mainstream paradigm en masse. And that we're going to just see, we're going to see a lot of these people run into this point of main confusion here, which is this band that you got to go through in your thinking before you drop down into woo, right? And you're just lost. You just don't know what's going on. You don't know where to turn or this sort of thing. That's why I'm producing a lot of these videos, so that I can at least put people in pointers. You know, David Morgan, Bix Weir, understand it, get it in your hand, hold it. That shit's going to be meaningful really damn quick. Anyway, so this is a little discussion. I always go way too long. Turns out spoken speech is more powerful than written speech, but it's about 25 to 35% longer to get the same idea across. And it's not as elegant. That's because you're working it out unless you're going on a script, and I can't do scripts. In scripts, you work it out ahead of time. And you get it really nice and tight and pack it in there. Okay, so absent the little woo, looking at big woo, there's going to be major opportunities that will be erupting in this period of time in here, especially in cryptos, all right? But not merely in the dollar value of those cryptos, but rather also the operational flow, the functioning of those cryptos as we go forward. So for instance, many people in, let me put it this way, in the last Great Depression, the run-up, the training depression, 1930s, people then that were smart, okay, so they seized gold and restricted gold, and as an American citizen, you weren't allowed to own gold by these bastards that we call government, this crime family. And they say, you can't own gold, you know, only us Cosa Nostra can have gold. Well, so some of the ones that were left around that had paper money and were smart and so on, they put in their paper money into mining stocks. And they bought gold miners because the miners were going to continue mining gold, and they knew that the value of it was going to go up, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a way of owning gold without getting into the gold business. We're going to find that a lot of people are going to take this same approach, one step removed from cryptos, by investing in such things as exchanges. And this is going to be a really good booming period for a while with exchanges. There will be problems with these exchanges. There always are. You better really do your research and pick the right one if you want to get into it, or the right ones. But there will be a booming business in exchanges as the number of parachutists start really rising, or the falling, okay? So we're gonna have a lot more parachutists falling out. So the volume of parachutists is gonna come in, and we're gonna need more exchanges to get them into crypto. But the immediacy problem for everybody is gonna be caused here by the inability to get silver. And I think, and the inability to get silver is commensurate with, that is to say, it is coinciding with a temporal marker, which is this lockup, the inability, the impossibility of buying Bitcoin. And so in the old data sets, there's this chart on Twitter you can go and see. In the old data sets, we get to this point where availability of Bitcoin simply dries up, and a very explainable, nonetheless exciting and curious thing happens. And that is that we get to some price. We'll call that price X dollars. And we'll just say that it's X dollars, and let's do it this way. Okay, so we're looking at some measure of dollars over its current amount. Might be 50,000, might be, I think it'll probably be closer to 64,000. That's my actual guess. It'll probably be closer to $64,000. And we will have a very interesting effect occur with Bitcoin. And that is to say that you will not be able to obtain it It'll go to a certain price, and that'll be the last quoted price for some considerable amount of time. Maybe that's a couple of weeks, maybe it's a couple of months. But what happens is that thereafter, all the Bitcoin just gets bought up. And as the Bitcoin is created by the Bitcoin miners, if they're willing to sell, that gets bought up. And it's bought up at some multiple of this that basically you just hear rumors of because you're not clued, you don't have that kind of dollars, and so you're not trying to buy them. And we just don't really know what the value is at an aggregate level. It's always fluctuating up and down. This is the impossibility to obtain, period. This is where we see, if we monitor the Bitcoin network, we see there's Bitcoins that are transitioning, that are being sent from address to address, and quite actually, quite a number of them, more than we would expect, are changing hands, but there's no commensurate understanding of what the actual price is because it's so many private sales. And it's just going to be really a weird period of time. That's when you get, the supposition that at some point we've got all of these other coins that are multiple, or that are significant fractions, 1/4, 1/2, 1/3, etc. They're significant fractions of Bitcoin's last quoted price. And so we say that these coins have reached the point where they're, a quarter of Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, or whatever. But we don't really know for sure because for some period of time, we won't know what is the price of a Bitcoin. And it'll also be because the central banks are printing money like mad, trying to get in on the game. And they understand that the issue of scarcity. And they're going to understand that relative to silver back here. And we're going to get the same kind of problem with silver. No one will be able to say what the true price is because you're not going to tell anybody how many dollars you accepted for that ounce of silver. You just won't say. And the buyer and you will know, and that'll be it, So anyway, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. This, of course, marks the death of the American empire, which is actually the globalist empire of America dominating the rest of the world and the globalists dominating the Americans, which I didn't like much. I didn't like that much at all. So we're going to go back to the constitutional republic. It's going to be different. It's going to be wildly exciting. It's going to be very much 1776 to, 1831 kind of excitement. Maybe, no, 1841 kind of excitement. Huge amount of stuff going on, all kinds of Enlightenment sort of things. The woo is going to bust out like mad, okay? Not just me doing woo, a lot of other people are doing woo. And we're going to start really making impacts on the social order as we get more and more Teslas out there. Not the cars, the individuals, Nikola Teslas, getting more and more of those kind of minds deeply involved in Woonomics. And they'll be funded. They'll be funded because we've got, these people are into cryptos, they're in all kinds of attention coins, this sort of thing. Anyway, and so it's a brief little discussion of Woonomics. I wanted to get into some other stuff here. That is and I'll just rattle on for a few more minutes. Then I got to get back in. It's cold as hell, and I had to turn the heat off. Okay, so it looks to me as though the data sets that in 2016 were reasonably accurate in describing the emergence of the Indian and Chinese areas of Asia as an emergent area for do-it-yourself bioengineering kind of things. That'll be the center for bioengineering on the planet. Not just simply because of the virus, but I mean many, many, many other indicators. It also looks like that the North America within those data sets is going to be the center for AI and the emergence of new woo tech. We will get the bump for this starting in June with the report from the military and the deep underground compartmentalized, whoosie was-its to Congress. I don't expect Congress to tell us shit, but I do expect their aides and everybody who's participating in this sort of thing to leak the shit out because it'll be so interesting. I also suspect that as we get into this period of time here, it's going to trigger the very large motivating factor in the conversion of all of the world into woo, which is desperation. So we had a dominating aspect of desperation hitting the mainstream paradigm that would peak with the release of with Secrets Revealed in July, August time frame. It might be as late as September, but I think it'll be July, August, somewhere in there. And the Secrets Revealed will be as a result of the desperation around the dollar. And you can see now that we're in a situation where, if I'm correct, and we see that the lack of silver, the lack of physical silver, strains all of the paper silver markets, and the bullion banks start breaking down, and their interactions between each other break down over this the course of this month, then maybe by the time we get to the end of this, which would be March 25th, and we get in towards beginning of April, maybe by then, that time we have a full-blown larger banking crisis that won't be able to be solved. Not the way they did Lehman Brothers and that sort of thing. It'll be a central banking crisis, because it'll float up through the bullion banks right into the central banks. And so central banks will die at that stage. That means currency's gone. It means like some nations will lose their currency. Right now we see Kenya saying Bitcoin is eating our currency's lunch. We can't have Bitcoin because our currency is crap now. Well, so central banks are dying. This is going to happen all over, and it'll come on up to the Fed. As the Fed dies, we can return to a constitutional republic. Bear in mind, our constitutional republic used silver as money, okay, and gold as a store of wealth. Now we have something also, which is cryptos, both as a medium of exchange and as a store of wealth. So we're set. All right, so we can easily return to the constitutional republic, just simply abandon the old American empire and the mainstream paradigm, move into our woo world, start inventing all kinds of new interesting things to do there, and also piggyback off the stuff that will be coming out in July and August from these deep underground compartmentalized think tanky things. It's going to be fun. I think it'll be really cool. We're going to go into AI in a serious way here, and AI is not what all the woo-woo people are fearful of. Computers are stupid. They're just really fast. They're just really stupid and really fast. Quantum computers don't run code like digital machines. They can't run AI. They can't ask questions. They don't get bazillions of data points. They don't do any data processing whatsoever. It's an entirely misapprehension of what the technology does and how it works. So, so this is not a time to be fearful that way. I think there's a whole lot of stuff that we got to be aware of. We got to be wary of, climate change, and we got to be wary of climate change activists. We got to be wary of government. We got to be wary of social activists, all of these kind of things. But as you drop into woo, a lot of that stuff goes away. Woonomics is like basically a separation of yourself from the system of empire, and you care less. So, like an aspect of the Woonomics is bet on Main Street. It's a trend, okay? A hashtag bet on Main Street. So pay cash locally for stuff and tip big. So we have to go into Olympia. My wife has medical appointments. She needs to be hydrated and stuff. I don't drink any sugar drinks and things. She'll drink these little lemon slushies to stay hydrated and cool. When we go to the place to buy them, they cost, like, depending on what time you get there, like $1 to $3. Well, I always pay with a 20, and I tell them, keep the change, guys. You need it. You deserve it. And then once a week, I'll make a point of going on out and tipping these I say kids, 30 and 40-year-olds at all these places with actual silver as well as dollars, so I can tell them this will have value. Here's why it will have value. It might one day, shortly be $1,000. Don't spend it. Keep it in your hand. And so they start thinking about it, right? And so I'm converting minds. So I'm a radical agitator. I'm a radical etherist, right? I'm an etherist activist. I'm dangerous. So yeah, so I'm dangerous. And I'm seriously dangerous, not like individually dangerous, but potentially mass dangerous because of the way of dynamic networking. So anyway, so that's what you do. Bet on Main Street. Corrupt the system from below by pulling the dollars out of it into this system. Extract the wealth out of there, because it's going away anyway. You can't save in toilet paper. These paper dollars, they're not even as good as toilet paper. They're rough, and they don't dissolve well in the septic. So toilet paper is actually a better thing to save in. Anyway, so that's what's going to happen here over the course of this next little period. And we will see this strike silver. It's already happened. The system is already broken. The question is, what are we going to do about it? So to give an analogy, I hate these things, but give an analogy, we're on our bicycle, that we're pedaling like mad, or it's an electric machine, and we're able to coast for a while, but we now recognize that the mechanism, the chain has come off, or the electric motor is broken, we're not getting active movement anymore. And we've already hit that point. So we will coast to a stop relative to the ability to get precious metals, physical, out of the system. And at that point, we have a major MSM problem. This is the mainstream media. So the mainstream media, let's put some dollar signs in there. The mainstream media is dependent on the dollar, can only support the dollar when they have to report that physical silver cannot be obtained, and thus its price might be $600 an ounce, who the hell knows. At that point, they start really crashing, because then the rest of the people that are left up here that haven't already gotten their parachutes are going to start figuring out how to get those parachutes and pack them up and where they're going to jump out of that falling empire plane. And we are not that far away. Anyway, guys, enjoy the next month. 10 days away, if I'm right, and I've been wrong before, rarely, but I have been wrong on timing. But I think I'm correct now because I'm seeing the early signs. But if I'm correct, we should have a very interesting month. Well, it'll be interesting long before then with all this other political shit and other things going on. But remember, on the 24th, you'll start seeing the signs of the big movement or non-movement in silver that's going to start pressuring the banks, and I think lead to a governmental crisis somewhere down further in the year, like maybe July or August, where the government's so strained by resources can't come up with no one wants their central bank dollars anymore, no one wants their treasuries, no one wants their bonds, they can't raise money to pay the army, all of this kind of stuff. What can they do? Well, they can crack open the vaults deep buried in the ground and sell the technology out into the open.